Friendo, Steve here. Welcome back to the channel. Since last we spoke, oh boy, a lot of stuff has happened. Brock Lesnar went on Pat McAfee's show and showed that he has like a personality and a soul. Stone Cold Steve Austin is evidently going back to WrestleMania for one more match, maybe more. But most shockingly, if you guys hadn't heard, if your sole source of information in the world of wrestling is right here at Wrestle Juice, or maybe even Wrestling News Now, Cody Rhodes has left AEW and is heading over to the Federation. That's right. Fightful had a story, yesterday morning or Tuesday morning, that Cody Rhodes couldn't come to an agreement with Tony Khan over the amount of money he's getting paid there in AEW, plus probably some amount of creative unfulfillment in AEW, so he left. So when Cody first was released, did he leave? I think he asked for his release and he was granted it, or he just left. I don't know what it was. When Cody first left WWE, he expressed the desire to, quote, make his own music, which was a metaphor for just going out and doing your own thing. And he was the first guy to write a bucket list in pro wrestling and publicize that on his social media, where he wanted to go around to various places and do cool things that you can't do in WWE. One of those things ended up being AEW. He ended up creating his own wrestling company, which wasn't on his bucket list. That just sort of happened. And he was one of the founding fathers of AEW. Fast forward now, 3 years later, and he doesn't want to do that anymore. He apparently, according to Fightful, a couple other places, he wanted more money. And he expected, because he was sort of a founding father and one of the main guys behind the scenes, that he should get said money. And Tony Khan said, well, should you? Should I really give you this money, or should I just spend that on more people to be signed there at AEW? And when you get rid of Cody, you open up time on TV, which probably, to be honest with you, more often than not could be used in a better way. And so then it was also reported that he'd been talking with people in WWE, which is nuts, because he left that place a while ago because he didn't like being Stardust, essentially. Cody is probably the most successful person to leave WWE and not go back at a certain point. I mean, when he left, not only did he sort of reinvent himself, he just sort of reinvented what it was to leave WWE and craft your own path. A very, very, very successful one. He's got that air about him. He made himself a big deal in all the other wrestling companies, and then of course in AEW, where he was still a big deal. He was just their TNT champion, and he did what he could to elevate that title, to make it like a co-world title with the AEW world title, so that when he had it, it was important. He had a terrific match against Sammy Guevara on his way out, and here we are. Now, apparently he's talking to WWE, and now the reports are, and this isn't Wrestling News Now, this is apparently like Wade Keller saying this, and a couple others are saying that Cody might be showing up as early as WrestleMania. That seems like a given. There might be some movement at Elimination Chamber, which is like hours away, basically. I mean, it's Saturday, but still, hyperbole. So I thought it'd be fun. Take a look at what are the likely scenarios that we can expect from Cody Rhodes, because evidently, according to Wade Keller, Vince McMahon's big on bringing Cody in, wants to make a big deal out of him. But you know how Vince is. He sort of sees a shiny new toy. Oh, make a big deal about it. And then they just sort of fall by the wayside. So I wrote down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 scenarios that could play out with Cody Rhodes in the WWE. Let's go from best to worst. The best situation is this. He's pushed as a legitimate main eventer on Raw. They immediately elevate him to guys to be on par with Seth Rollins, Randy Orton, I was going to say Big E, but he's gone, Bobby Lashley, Of course, Brock Lesnar is the big guy there, but I get the feeling that he's probably going to be spending most of his time on SmackDown. Nobody is at Brock Lesnar's level except for Roman Reigns, so that's not. But everybody else, Kevin Owens, all those guys who are in the upper. The thing about Raw is that there's one true main eventer there, and it's Brock Lesnar. The other guys are sort of B-level main eventers. You know what I mean? You know what I mean. And so he could be there. He could, with that sort of playing field, he could have the WWE Championship. That's a possibility. He could vie for the WWE Championship if they're able to, sort of bring him in really hot and maintain that momentum. That's a possibility. That's the best case scenario. There's no chance that this guy is going to dethrone Roman Reigns. That will never happen. That's not going to happen. Just get it out of your head. It's not going to happen. So that's a possibility. I don't think that's the likeliest scenario for a couple of reasons. Mainly because I wonder if Vince McMahon would be like, yeah, I want to feature him in a major way, but also I don't want to give anybody in the impression that this guy who left and was the secondary champion in AEW is good enough to be our main champion here in WWE. I kind of feel like that goes against Vince's DNA. And to be honest with you, it kind of makes sense. Number two, they could use him as sort of an away from the title top guy, like a featured event type guy, like feuding with, I don't know, Vince or the company, like, the grander structure of the company, leading maybe an invasion type faction. Although I don't know who they could get. Maybe they could steal like Brian Cage away from AEW or something like that. What I'm thinking of in my head is kind of like the role that Shane has when he shows up. He mixes it up with management. He sort of does what he wants. It's never really part of the title scene. And as long as he's not showing up and big leaguing everybody backstage at the Royal Rumble, that's usually the role Shane has. Of course, Shane's been fired, which kind of adds more credence to the idea that Cody could take that place. Like Vince would bring Cody in under his wing or something. I don't know. It's that sort of away from the title, mixing it up with like the WWE proper as opposed to other wrestlers. And other wrestlers are just used as his proxy. That kind of thing. If Triple H was still active in the ring, it would be a natural fit for Cody to feud with Triple H in some way, shape, or form. Away from the titles, but still in a major, prominent sort of storyline resident way, if you will. Next, here's my most likely scenario for Cody Rhodes. This is probably how it's going to go down. He's going to be like Edge 2.0. He's going to have like a full-time light schedule. Like he'll be there, but then he'll also go away for a while, which he already does in AEW. You'll get a bunch of marquee dream match type situations, kind of like with the people when I mentioned up in the first one, the Raw main event scene. So you have feuds with Rollins, Orton, Owens. It'd be on Raw. And maybe like his Mania match would be like Miz and Maurice versus Cody and Brandy. That would be the situation where it's still a marquee thing. He's mixing it up with wrestlers, but they allow Brock to take that WWE title over to SmackDown and feud with Roman for that title versus title thing. There's a very distinct possibility. I still think it's very possible that Roman is going to be a champ coming out of WrestleMania, and they're going to try to use Roman to anchor Raw and SmackDown as well, try to boost Raw's ratings. I think that's a likely scenario. But in this situation, he wouldn't be vying for the title, but he would still be mixing it up with those main event talents there in Raw. I think this is probably the most likely situation. I think that title is going to be heading over to Roman Reigns, and I think that that's going to leave Cody Rhodes with, dream matchups that we probably saw maybe single matches of back when he was with WWE still. But now that he's got so much more sort of clout and prestige, they mean a lot more now. So that's kind of where I see Cody Rhodes ending up. Falling a little bit farther from that, let's say Vince gets sort of tired of immediately, or let's say he does this situation for a year and then gets traded over to SmackDown. Well, what's there on SmackDown? There's two things. Number one is Roman Reigns. He could feud with Roman Reigns, but let's face it, he'd be yet another person that Roman Reigns would beat because he's unbeatable at this point. And at that situation, at that point in that situation, Cody would just sort of he would fall to the low card of SmackDown, because if you really think about it, SmackDown has a main event scene with Roman Reigns and then a low card. And that's it. There is no mid-card scene really on SmackDown. You've got Roman Reigns, you've got Charlotte, and then everything else is sort of just whatever in the low card. I mean, you got Naomi and Sonya Deville. Actually, they're mid-card right now. But when you think about it, you got like Sheamus, Cesaro, Nakamura, Sami Zayn, the Intercontinental scene, right? What do they do? Boogs. What do they do with that? Nothing. That Intercontinental Championship has been defended like what? Twice over the past, like, I don't know, year or whatever. That's exaggeration, but you get my point. Shinsuke rarely defends that title. His matches usually are focusing more on Rick Boogs, and there's no scene to really speak of. Sheamus is busy mentoring Ridge Holland, who gets beat a bunch. None of it really matters in any way, shape, or form. That would probably happen after like 2 years of him being there. The luster is off. People stop caring about him. Vince stops caring about him. He ends up in the same situation as Sheamus, Cesaro, Nakamura, and Sami Zayn over there on SmackDown, assuming all those pieces are still around. That's the sort of position he'd be in. I feel like that's a likely 2-year outlook for Cody Rhodes. And then finally, the worst thing that could happen is Stardust, which you would think that the first thing Cody would say to his lawyer when he's working out the deal with WWE is, I want in writing, no Stardust, no face paint, no major character alterations unless I give the green light. But more than anything, no Stardust. No Stardust. No Stardust. But if he doesn't get that in writing, that's the worst case scenario there for Cody Rhodes in WWE. That's what I think. Hey, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Do me a huge favor also, give this video a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Thanks so much for tuning in. I appreciate it. Till next time, hey, we'll talk to you later.